We thought it was just an abandoned football field, until the shadows started moving, and we realized the game was never ours to begin with. The old football field at the edge of town was a place we all knew: cracked goalposts, torn nets, and the faint, permanent scent of damp earth. It was a forgotten patch of land surrounded by towering oaks whose limbs creaked like whispers in the wind. Everyone said it was cursed. We said it was just a story to scare kids. We thought we were invincible. That night, the air was heavier than usual, thick and wet like something breathing just out of sight. It was Dean's idea to play under the full moon, a dare fueled by boredom and bravado. 5 of us showed up: Dean, Mason, Jules, Tyler, and me. We brought an old football, our flashlights, and enough misplaced confidence to choke out the unease clawing at our guts. As we stepped onto the field, the grass crunched dry beneath our feet despite the humid air. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the ground, twisting and curling around us even when the floodlights we set up flickered on. It didn't seem right, but none of us said a word. We just laughed too loud, kicked the ball too hard, and pretended we didn't notice the way the night seemed to breathe with us. It started normally enough: shouts, cheers, the thud of the ball against our sneakers. But then, during a sprint toward the goal, Jules suddenly stopped. He stared into the darkness beyond the far goalpost, his flashlight slipping from his grasp and landing with a soft thud. "What's wrong?" I called out. He didn't answer. We all followed his gaze, and that's when we saw it: a figure standing still at the edge of the field, watching us. Not moving. Not blinking. The game was no longer just ours. At first, we tried to convince ourselves it was nothing, just some late-night drifter, maybe a prankster from school trying to spook us. Dean, always the loudest, cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Hey, you lost or something?" His voice echoed across the silent field, but the figure didn't flinch. It just stood there, a black silhouette blending into the darker tree line. Something inside me twisted tight. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, but pride held us frozen. Mason grabbed the ball and kicked it hard toward the goal where the figure stood. The ball spun through the air, but midway it seemed to jerk, veering off course as if someone had batted it away, except no one moved. The ball landed with a soft, unnatural thud. We all heard it, but when we looked, it wasn't lying in the grass anymore. It had vanished. "What the hell?" Tyler muttered, backing away slowly. Then, without warning, the figure took a step forward. Not a stumble. Not a shuffle. A smooth, deliberate stride. Our flashlights flickered violently, plunging the field into momentary darkness before sputtering back on. In that brief blackout, the figure had halved the distance between us. Panic ripped through the group. Dean laughed nervously, stepping behind Mason as if somehow muscle would protect him. Jules finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to go. Now." But it was too late. Behind us, from the opposite side of the field, came the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing. Slow. Right behind us. We weren't just being watched. We were being surrounded. We spun around in unison, flashlights swinging wildly across the cracked field. For a second, all we saw was the familiar stretch of abandoned bleachers and rusting goalposts. But then, just at the edge of the light's reach, more figures appeared. Not one, not two, but a line of them, forming a crooked half-circle around us. They were all still, unmoving, like shadows pinned to the earth. No faces. No features. Just the suggestion of twisted bodies in the mist that had begun to creep across the grass. My mouth went dry as I realized they weren't stepping out of the woods. They were emerging from the very ground itself, like the earth was spitting them out. Dean gripped my arm, his fingers trembling. "Run. Now." We broke into a sprint, flashlights bouncing and cutting wild shapes into the night. But the field stretched longer than it ever had before, the goalposts seemingly miles away. My lungs burned, my legs felt like lead. No matter how hard we ran, the edges of the field shifted and warped, trapping us inside. Jules was the first to falter, tripping over a root that hadn't been there moments ago. As we rushed to help him up, we heard it, a low hum like 100 voices whispering just out of hearing. It rose and fell like a chant, filling the air with something heavy and ancient. Tyler shined his light toward the sound, and for a fleeting moment, I wished he hadn't. One of the figures, closer now, had no eyes, just dark, yawning sockets that stared straight through us. Its mouth stretched into an impossible, silent scream. We realized then we weren't trapped in a place. We were trapped in something else's memory, and it did not want to let us go. We stumbled through the thickening mist, clutching each other like blind men in a world that had turned inside out. The whispers grew louder, merging into faint words that brushed against our ears, cries of agony, begging for help, desperate pleas we couldn't understand. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the field kept twisting, pulling us back toward the center. Dean, breathing hard, pointed toward the old storage shed near the bleachers. There. We can hide. With no better plan, we bolted. The door screeched open, revealing a narrow, dust-choked room lined with broken helmets and tattered jerseys. We slammed the door behind us and sank against the walls, flashlights trembling in our hands. But even inside, there was no escape from the nightmare. On the far wall, faded photos of football teams long forgotten hung crookedly. In the dim light, we saw their faces shift, smiling mouths melting into grimaces of terror, eyes hollowing out into black pits. Jules pressed his hand to one of the photos and jerked back with a yelp. His palm now bore a mark, a jagged, dark imprint like a brand. The room grew colder, our breath puffing out in ghostly clouds. Through the cracked window we saw them, the figures moving closer, their heads tilting at impossible angles, limbs twitching like marionettes controlled by invisible strings. One by one they raised their arms and pointed directly at us. The walls around us began to pulse, the very wood groaning as if alive. "We have to get out," Mason whispered, voice cracking. They're calling us." But it wasn't a call. It was a summons. And deep down we knew, whatever these things were, they wanted to make us part of them. The shed shook violently, the walls splintering as unseen fists pounded from every side. The floor trembled beneath us, cracks spiderwebbing outward like the ground itself was trying to consume us. Dean tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the field had sealed us inside, trapping us like insects in a jar. Jules cried out, clutching his branded palm, the mark burning a deep, angry red. His eyes glazed over, and before we could stop him, he staggered toward the door and threw it open. The mist swallowed him whole. "No!" Mason shouted, reaching for him, but it was too late. From the doorway we could see them waiting. The figures standing in a perfect circle now, humming in a low, guttural tone that vibrated through our bones. They didn't chase Jules. They simply absorbed him. He disappeared among them, his scream cut off like a snuffed flame. The realization hit all of us at once. They didn't need to hunt us. They just needed us to give up. Dean, Tyler, and I locked eyes, a silent agreement passing between us. We weren't going down like this. Without another word, we burst out of the shed, racing across the field, pushing through the thick, choking fog. Shapes lunged at us from the corners of our vision, hands clawing at our clothes, whispering promises of rest, of peace, if only we'd just stop running. Tyler stumbled, dragged down by grasping hands, his flashlight spinning wildly into the mist. I hesitated, but Dean yanked me forward. "Don't look back," he roared. We broke free from the field's edge, collapsing onto the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. When we looked back, the field was empty. No mist. No figures. Just a silent, rotting patch of land under the cold gaze of the moon. But we knew the truth. The field hadn't let us escape. It had simply chosen to let us live, to spread the story. And every time the wind howls across that forgotten ground, I swear I still hear them calling.